Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Really Useful Podcast. I'm your host, Bonnie, also known as LTPot7. I'm here once again with my co-host.
So welcome everybody, and today we got us, actually all the books are kind of special in their own way, but we got another special book for you. It's Henry the Green Engine. Henry the Sick Engine.
The only book to have 5 stories instead of 4.
Pretty much, and sadly we couldn't find any information on why that was the case, but, whatever.
Yeah, I also couldn't find too much information on, the book. The Thomas Tank Engine Man basically goes into detail about why Henry's sick and everything, and, today we got Henry the Green Engine. This is going to be a pretty long episode because we got 5 stories to go through.
We got five stories to go through, and we actually do have interesting topics to talk about all the stories, especially one, but we'll get to it when we get to it.
Yes, we got one very interesting topic. We're not going to say what it is, but we'll get into it when we get to the stories. And yeah, we're going to be serious with that one. So, Henry the Green Engine. So, Zach, do you got any do you remember anything about this book when you first read it, or no?
I don't really have any, special memories per se. I think the only thing that was probably interesting to all of us that probably started with the Railway series was like you said, this was the only book to have 5 stories instead of 4 and everything. And other than that, I really don't have anything that special to say about the book. Like I said, most of these early books and everything, once we start getting into the books or the stories that have not been adapted into television, we'll probably have a little bit more to say about them, what our first impressions was. But other than that, most of these early books, since they're already adapted into, television, there's really not that much you can say in terms of, first impressions or, what did you actually thought when you first read the book?
Well, yeah, like you said, I first read the book when I was 9 years old, and I was surprised to see that this book had 5 stories instead of 4. And looking back, Henry, I'm so used to having Gordon's whistle and Henry's sneeze combined together that I totally forgot how short those stories were.
Yeah, we'll actually get more into that when we get into it, but I do feel that at least in terms of it in the middle of the stories, and this is actually going to be something that may or may not play an effect of my rating and everything, because again I'm also going off a little bit. Whatever number the Railway Series Book Club, critique on this book. One of the critiques was just while the stories themselves are not, bad, most of them are good, and I do agree with them. They do feel a little out of place at times. They do feel the order of the stories was kind of not necessarily random, but they just felt they were out of order. And once we get to the stories themselves and everything, they do feel some of the stories probably should have been in a different order than what we actually got from the book itself.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the only book to have 5 stories, and our personal theories with this strange choice is that either they wanted to experiment to see if they could do 5 stories, or they basically thought maybe the stories are kind of short, so Wilbur decided to write another one. Who knows? So yeah, with that, I don't think we have too much of the history portion. The only thing that is interesting about today's the history portion today is that basically children were writing to Wilbur asking how was Henry doing? Is he gonna be feeling better? And if you remember back in the previous episodes, we discussed that Wilbur hated Henry and he was super close to getting rid of him. However, when the kids started writing to him asking how is he feeling, is he gonna get better, he decided to basically work with Henry to basically come up with the backstory as to why Henry was sick all the time. And then it was Wilbur's idea to make him based off a Black 5, and that's what he looks like today, as a Black 5, in the Railway series at least. And one thing that I really love about this book is that starting from this book, Wilbur decided to base off all of the engines from real life counterparts.
And not only that, this is also the first book where now all the engines outside of Thomas have numbers.
Yes, which was about time, honestly, because now we can finally say who's which, and what engine is which engine is, if you get what I mean.
Well, to be fair, that's not going to stop the parents that never seen Thomas for being confused on who engine is who.
Yeah, sadly, but yeah. So I don't think we have anything else to say. So shall we get into the stories? Because we got a long episode today.
Yep. So yeah, as we said, we got 5 stories, and I believe you're starting off this one with our very first story, Cole.
Cole, or Henry Special Cole, as Johnny Morris called it, but I prefer calling it Cole. So
I
Cole.
believe that's also what they call in the U.S. version too, Henry Special Cole, isn't it?
I think so. Yes, I believe so. Yeah, I'll have to.
While you're actually, recap, so while you're actually explaining the plot, I'm gonna look it up real quick.
All right, so Cole. So we open up with Henry still feeling sick because of his steaming problems, and the Fat Controller is kind of exhausted after telling Henry that they brought lots of new parts and new paint, but it done no good, and so he tells it that if he doesn't get better, they'll have to get another engine, which makes Henry, his German fireman, very sad. And so one day, the Fat Controller decides to ride on Henry to see what's the matter with him. And it turns out that the coal is wrong because, Henry has a small firebox. Regular coal doesn't, make any effect on him. And so the fireman tells him that with Welsh coal, he'd be a different engine. The Fat Controller says it's expensive, but he said that Henry should have a fair chance. When the Welsh coal arrives, Henry feels immediately better. He feels like a brand new engine, basically, and he basically runs with the Welsh coal, and then basically teases Thomas at the end with saying, "Where have you been, lazy bones? I can't all about for tank engines. Bye," and he goes away, and that's Cole basically.
Alright, so before you give your plot synopsis, yes, in the US version it is called Henry Special Cole.
Oh, so Johnny Morris came up with it, and then the U.S. adapted.
He pretty much came up with it. Like Britt was probably listening to the Johnny Morris audio, and he was just like, "That's actually a really good U.S. title. I'm gonna steal that."
I mean, it works. So
it does.
So Cole, I really love this story. Honestly. I think the story does a good job on telling us why exactly Henry was feeling ill for most of the previous times. Basically, it was because of his small firebots because he was built from stolen parts from Sir Nigel Gresley's failed Pacific experiment. That's why he basically couldn't steam well, because he had a small firebots, and that's why the coal didn't make him run properly. So Cole, so yeah, I also really love the ending where Henry teases Thomas about where have you been, lazy bones? I can't wait for Donald and tank engines. Bye, and he goes away. That is pretty funny.
I actually do like that moment too. Honestly, that moment alone really. Actually, that's more of a highlight of how far Henry has come ever since he got that special coal and such.
Indeed, and I also love in Johnny Morris' narration where he makes Henry say, "Oh, I feel fine. I feel fine.
I feel fine. Where's my asthma?"
I really love Johnny Morris' narration for this story. And, I can't think of anything else to say about this story. This story is a great way to start off the book. And you know what? In my prototype score sheet right here, my original rating was an 8. But I'm going to ramp it up to a 9.
Alrighty.
I love this story.
That's a good way to start. Alright, so for me, for Cole, this story is actually a really good story. If you remember when I did my review on season 1 of the TV series, I placed this episode as number 3 for season 1. And to be fair, this is still a really great story and everything. I still love the story very much, and I still stand by, putting that into number 3. Now, this is where I'm gonna, this is something that I was kind of thinking a little bit. And maybe I may be thinking, too much on this, but I do think, the subplot for Henry being sick actually works a little bit, in terms of visuals. Visually, it works a little bit more better in the TV series than it did with the Railway series. And let me explain why. So the first time that we do see, or at least hear about Henry's sickness and everything, with which was Thomas's train and Thomas the tank engine, the illustrator actually does do a good job on portraying Henry being sick. He actually does do a good job on making the kids, worry. It's just oh man, is Henry gonna be, okay or everything?
But by looking at Thomas's face, he doesn't give a shit that Henry is sick.
Yeah, he doesn't give a shit. But in the TV series and everything, they actually do show Thomas actually also looking concerned too, which actually does play up empathy for Henry a lot more better and everything. They actually do a really good job on showing how sick Henry is and such. And especially when we get to Thomas and the guard. So this is where the stories could differ a little bit for me. And again, I'm gonna explain a little bit why. So in Thomas and the guard, in terms of in the TV series, with both the music and even with the way, Henry was slowly coming in and everything. Again, they actually do a really good job on, like, playing up, Henry's sickness and everything, that you're still wondering how sick is he and everything, like, is he going to be okay? What's going to happen to him? And when the episode finally comes in, they do a really good job on, like, you actually want Henry to stay. You want Henry to actually feel better. And again, that music they play, like, whenever Henry is sad or sick, that really works. It works so well and everything. And when Henry actually does feel better, you're cheering for him. You actually still, you're glad that he's finally feeling well. You're glad that he can actually finally pull trains. That ending, like, again, it's both hilarious, but again, it shows how far Henry has come.
Side
He's not
note,
sick anymore. He can actually pull trains again.
Side note, I love his sad theme. His sad theme is possibly one of my favorite themes of the entire classic era.
Same here. Like, again, a sad theme works that, again, like, once he's feeling better and you hear Henry's happy theme, again, it works. It plays your emotions so well.
Mm-hmm.
Now this where the Railway series kind of feels a little bit, and again, I don't think it's not so much more on Audrey's writing. This is more like on Dalby's illustration, because when he illustrates the scene on, like, Henry, being sick and everything, Henry doesn't really look all that sad or anything. If anything, like, he's kind of either happy, or at least he doesn't care that, like, he's not all that sick. By the time that this story comes up, and again, like, because, like, Audrey didn't really expand it all that much in the previous book and everything. Well, I don't want to say, like, his situation is not still sad or still, not serious. It does come off a little bit as, like, again, you do actually want him to feel better, but I don't get the same,
the same emotion you have with the TV episode.
I don't feel the same emotional attachment to Henry in that book as I did, like, when I watched, like, the TV series version of it.
Yeah, you know what? Thinking about it, yeah, I didn't feel the same emotion I got with the episode, because comparing it to, like, the TV version, the book has limited visuals, and by limited visuals, I mean, it has very few illustrations to show that Henry's actually feeling, sick.
Yeah. And again, like, because, again, like, going back with, like, Henry and the elephant, like, it is still a little surprising that, like, Audrey didn't try to, like, work in Henry's sickness as, like, being one of the reasons why he wanted to go on strike and such. Which again, when this story comes on, it still feels more like, it does feel like in parts that, like, Audrey only put this in because children were still asking about his sickness. Is Henry feeling well or anything? Like, is he still sick and such? I bet you any money, if the kids never asked the questions, or if he didn't get any letters about it in the first place, I bet you any money he probably would have dropped the sickness altogether.
Most likely, yeah. Yeah. Or he would have gotten rid of the character.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he definitely would have gotten rid of the character altogether too. Now that I think about it, maybe he might still play into the sickness. Like, maybe, like, or maybe, like, what he could have done, like, he could have, like, there could have been a story where, like, Henry wasn't actually sick all the time. He was just faking it as such, and maybe, like, that's why Fat Controller would have sent him away in the first place.
Yeah, so I'm kind of surprised that that had the kids not written to him asking how Henry was, yeah, he probably would have gotten rid of him pretty quickly.
Yeah, pretty much. Again, I don't want to, like, say, like, the story is not important or anything, or that, like, it's a bad story because of it. Because, like I said, at least in terms of the writing style, it, again, like, it does do a good job on, like, at least to the kids that were attached to Henry and everything, it does a good job on having the kids, root for Henry, hoping that he does get better, and that, again, visually and everything, like, at least in terms of the illustration and everything, when Henry actually does feel better, you do feel that way. You still feel proud of him. You still feel happy that, like, he's gonna get to pull trains again after all this time.
I also wanted to talk about a little bit about this special code, because I actually saw a fan made episode where there was a sign that said Welsh Coal strictly for Henry only, and so in that episode, James got so jealous of the special code that he wanted to try it out, and basically because it was for Henry only, he was not allowed to do it, and so the driver played a trick on him, and he basically went to where the special code was, and he basically loaded regular code instead of the special code to trick James, and he basically said that hey, I loaded the special code, so we're ready to go. And it wasn't until
so because pretty much like he did like a placebo on James and such.
yeah, and it wasn't until the end of the episode where James almost got in trouble because he said I took the special cold, but the Fat Controller overheard him, and yeah. He almost got in trouble, but then the driver came and said, "Oh no, we were using regular coal all the time." And James was like, "So all this time I was using regular coal?"
You played a trick on me? You gave me a placebo? Give me my money back.
Yeah, that was a really good fan-made episode. I don't remember the person that made it, but man, it was really good.
Probably should check it out sometime soon, because actually, yeah, that actually does sound like a really... actually, that does sound like something that, like, either Wilbur or even a classic TV series would have probably written.
Yeah, that's something James would have done in the classic era, if you think about it.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it would have. Like, actually, yeah, I could actually. To be fair, even in the hit model era, like, I could actually see that episode being made in the hit model era too. Anyway, and also another side note too. I actually do like on how the Fat Controller is actually, warning Henry, like, don't push yourself too far. That moment was actually very sweet.
Indeed, it was.
So yeah, for me, I am gonna knock some points off a little bit, like in terms of like at least to me visually, like the story didn't really do too much for me to make me feel attached to Henry, but at the same time, like in terms of writing, again, it does a real good job on like having the kids and everything root for Henry and actually making the kids feel sorry and hoping that like Henry gets better and such. So yeah, for me, in terms of my rating, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10.
Okay, so alright, so this is a very good start to the book.
Alrighty, now
the big one, the one that is so popular to this very day.
Yep, we're gonna talk about Henry's Forest, everybody. The story that Wilbur hated for some reason and everything, but I don't know why. He was the one that put the story in the book to begin with. No, we're talking about the Flying Kipper.
Go ahead.
Alright, so the Flying Kipper. So at the start of the story, which is something that's actually interesting, I might go into this a little more detail, or maybe not, I don't know. But at least in the beginning of the book, we actually get a little explanation about ships coming into like the harbor and everything. And basically, the one ship that is very important to like the island is basically the Flying Kipper train. So basically, the Flying Kipper train is just basically a train full of fish and everything, and they take them down to the markets and such. So one winter evening with the special coal and everything, Henry's given a chance to pull the Flying Kipper. And the Fat Controller promises him that, like, if he pulls the Kipper well, then he'll let him pull the Express and such. So on the winter morning when he arrives, he takes the train. Everything goes well and everything, but snow and ice caused an accident, and pretty much Henry crashes into a brake van, which thankfully the driver, fireman, and the guard jump out just in time. And so does Henry's driver and fireman, although I'm pretty sure all of them will still probably go to the hospital after that crash. But not in the Island Soda. In the Island Soda, everything is okay. Apparently, like, if you crash into anything, you can just brush it off, like, no problem. apparently everyone's a superhuman. But anyway, yes, so after the accident and everything, the Fat Controller tells Henry he's going to send him the crew and everything to where he'll get a new shape and a new firebox, so he won't have to worry about needing special coal anymore. And lo and behold, that's how we got Henry becoming a, Black 5?
A Black 5, yeah.
Yeah, Black 5. Alright, I was about ready to call him the Mark 5, but I'm like, wait, no, that's Speed Racer.
It's a Black 5, LMS Black 5.
So the Flying Kipper. So, again, the story is a fan favorite for a reason, and while I do understand, like, the Railway Series, book club's problems, with the story and everything.
What were their problems with the story? I haven't watched their episode.
So it's not so much the story itself, but this is something, like, they brought up, and the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, yeah, I kind of see where they were coming from, because when you read the story on its own, like, okay, like, picture this. Imagine if we read Thomas the Tank Engine, and after Thomas and Gordon, we immediately cut to Thomas in the breakdown train, and suddenly Thomas gets his branch line and such. And then after that, like, we cut back to, like, Thomas's train and Thomas and the trucks and such.
Yeah, it goes out of four. Basically, I thought about it, and yeah, it kind of goes, it kind of jumbled.
Like, when you really think about it, like, this story actually does feel more like a grand book, like a good grand story to finish off the book and such. It does feel weird that, like, we only had one story where we got introduced in the special coal. And then immediately after that, the Fat Controller says, like, well, good news, Henry, you won't need special coal anymore. So I guess the book is done now, right? Nope, you still got 3 more stories to go. So yeah, it does feel weird that the solution to, like, Henry's special coal was resolved very quickly and such. I do agree that, like, either that, like, either the flying kipper should have been moved, or at least should have been rewritten a little bit to where, like, Henry will still have the special coal, but, like, maybe he might, start feeling different enough that by the end of, like, Henry Sneeze, that's when the Fat Control is just like, alright, Henry, good news, we're gonna get you a new shape and a new firebox. So you won't need your special coal anymore.
You know what? Now that you brought that up, that actually might affect my rating a little bit, because that's not the only issue I have with the story. There's another.
I do know your other issue with the story, but I guess I'll let you say it or something when we get.
Yes, keep going. Keep going.
Anyway, so yeah, I do agree, like, with their criticisms on that story and everything. And to be fair, I hope I'm not, paraphrasing or, like, misremembering. But that's basically what I remember, That's basically what I remember their criticisms. But if I got anything wrong, then I do apologize in advance. But anyway, yeah, even if the story does feel out of order in some way, or at least, it feels like, should have been long until at the end of the book, this is still a really great story. Like, I still really enjoy this a lot. Whether it's the TV series with, like, the fantastic visuals and everything, and again, that music, that flying kipper.
Oh, fuck yeah. Fuck yeah.
It still kicks ass to this day. Like, just having the visuals and even the snowy effect. The snow effect was gorgeous and everything. And again, the night shots and everything. I could just go on and on gushing about that episode forever. It's just really appealing to look at that, going along with the story. It does feel like you're going on an adventure. It feels like, it does feel like you're traveling along with Henry on this line. And again, when that music builds up to that crash again, it does a really good job. Like, the music does a really good job, like, narrating the story that is happening to you right in front of you. That's a good sign right there. To be fair, even in the Railway series, even in the illustrations, like, for Henry traveling along are still really good.
Oh, yes. Gorgeous. My favorite.
Especially that second illustration. That second, well, not the second one. I think it's the third one. The one where, like, you see Henry's fire. You see his firebox glowing from his hand. That's
yes,
really
yes. Cool. I love that illustration.
That is so beautiful to look at, and even seeing, the single and such. I will admit, like, the crash itself, at least in terms of illustrated, was a little bit weird, in some places. But again, even so, though, even after that crash and everything, you start to feel for Henry again. You start to feel like, oh no, like, is he gonna get in trouble or something, or, like, what's gonna happen to him now and such.
Yeah. I also find his face a little bit funny when he crashes. He's like, ooh.
Oh, boggers. I had to say it at least once.
But yeah, the illustrations are good, and if I may, let me explain a little bit of.
I do know what you're gonna say, but go ahead.
Okay, so let's get the first thing out of the way. I'm gonna be respectful. I know a lot of Thomas fans love this story, and that's okay. Continue to love it. But me personally, I find the story a little bit overrated.
Oh, all right. Go ahead. Explain.
All right. So the TV episode, I don't have a problem with the TV episode. The TV episode is perfect on its own. The music is fantastic, the visuals are fantastic and everything. But every time I try to, like it, like a lot of Thomas fans like it, I just come back with like a meh, okay, if you get what I mean. And I do like a little bit more the TV episode where basically Henry crashes and there's complete silence after the crash. Whereas in the book version, that fireman is complaining about the cocoa, and it kind of ruins the moment for me a little bit. It's funny, I will admit it. It is hilarious, but it just ruins the moment a little bit. Whereas in the TV version, it's so dark that you're like, oh my god, is Henry gonna be okay after this?
Yeah, actually, now that you think about, now that you said that and everything, and the more I'm thinking about it, I do understand where you're coming from, because, yeah, this is something I like. Well, also keep in mind, this is something I like, the Railway series does do a little bit. I like, for every, serious moment and such, they try to, like, put in, like, a little lighthearted joke or something and everything, and I do think the joke about the fireman worrying more about his mug than the fact that, like, he could have died and such, it is a little funny and everything, but I do understand what you mean about like, it does distract too much from like the serious moment that is going on, and yeah, when you're reading the book itself on its own, without the TV visuals or even the TV music, it does. I guess I do see why like some people come off to it feeling a little meh about the story and everything. Because if you're just reading it on its own and everything, well, at least
it's basically like cooking a cake, but the cake is missing, the frosting. In other words.
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, yeah, that's even a good analogy right there. I will say though, at least in terms of the structure, it is structured nicely though. Like
Yes.
I never felt like the story was rushed or dragged on too long or anything like that. It is structurally nice. It is structured nicely and such, so I will still give it that.
Yes.
That's probably still why, like, I still like the story myself for what it is.
I also like the story. I'm not saying that, the story is bad because it's missing the core features that the TV episode had. I still enjoy the story on its own.
It's just like, when you're reading it on its own and everything, like, as like you said, given, like, the visuals that you were given to as well, too. You can only take so much, like, what the story is giving you if you're just reading it from the book itself.
Yeah, the piece of the cake that is missing for me is the music. Without the music, well, I know it's a book, but, I've always put the music in my head whenever I read that story.
To be fair, I'm pretty sure all of us, put that music in our head whenever we read this story now.
Yeah, but without the music, the story kind of just feels a little bit...
Not necessarily bland, but like you said, you just feel that like it's missing something, but you can't quite put your finger on it what it is that is missing.
Exactly. That's exactly the point I was trying to get.
And actually, now that you brought that up, another little point for me as well too. I also did not necessarily weird, but I also did found it strange that like how in the book version like they start off explaining the different types of ships that come into the harbor, and we cut to like the driver explaining to Henry like hey, we're gonna take the Flying Kipper and such.
I feel they should have done that first, and then we can go to the harbor and talk about a little bit about the economy.
Yeah, because reading that part in the book, it does feel weird that like we're gonna talk about the harbor, and then like all of a sudden here comes Henry literally at the harbor, and like the driver's just basically explaining to him that like hey, we pulled the Kipper nicely, then the Fat Controller will let us pull the Express. We can make Gordon jealous.
And but yeah, I feel like that should have come first, and then the part about the ships. But yeah, I also want to talk about a little bit about the ending where basically the
Sure, go ahead.
About him getting sent to crew. I don't know how to feel about for some reason like the special coal part just kind of just went away quickly. Like we ended up on a good note in the last story, but then suddenly it's just
this is another reason why I was. That's the reason why I say like in the beginning. Now that the Rare States book clubs have brought it up, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I was just like, it does feel weird that Author didn't decide to like put the story at the very end, because it does make perfect sense for this to be the story to wrap up Henry's troubles and everything, and for him to like start a new life and such.
In my personal opinion, I would have put the next story that comes after this one first.
Actually, that was kind of like the same thing they were saying. I think probably what they could have done is actually, now that I think about it, here's what they could do.
Yes,
they could do like Gordon's whistle, where like instead of Gordon being jealous that like Henry gets a new shade, he gets jealous that Henry gets difficult than he does and such, and you can still have the same plot about him complaining that Henry whistles too much. Yeah, and then maybe when you get to Henry sneeze, maybe you can maybe Audrey could have like play out the special coal right here, and about like maybe he could say that like the special coal is what also helps him create more ashes and such, and that's how like Henry was able to make extra ashes. And actually, now that I think about it more and more, like at the end of Henry's sneeze and such, then you could have done Percy in the trousers and everything. Henry is sent to the shed because like the Fat Controller didn't like what he did to the boys and everything, so he just stays in there for a little bit, and then you can still have Percy's own incident. And then we cut to the Flying Kipper, where again it feels more like a proper ending.
Yeah, basically he proves his word. In other words,
pretty much, kind of almost like the same way in Thomas, except more that like except in just more like he has to deal with like the fact that he has like special coal outside of like the normal regular coal that other engines uses. Yeah,
actually, that would have made the book like a perfect book, together.
It would. It definitely would shine like a lot more better.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, going back to the Flying Kipper, yeah, I kind of, don't know how to feel about, the special
Well,
call.
actually, before we do anything, how do you feel about Henry's new shape? Like, how do you think he looks in his new shape?
Oh man, as a fan of the Black Five, he looks amazing.
He does actually look very good. Like, I do admit his new shape looks real good.
If you look up a Black Five on, if you look up a Black Five, I love the way the Black Fives are shaped. I just love the looks, and Henry looks very good, very good.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So for me personally, and now that we actually talked about this more and more in terms of the book, I believe I gave Cold an 8, right?
Yes, you gave Cole
Yeah.
an 8.
Okay, so Gave Into the Flying Kipper, I still love the story. Like, it's still one of my favorites. But I will admit, the more we talked about it in a way that, like, the structure is kind of weird. And I do admit, like, the pacing might be a little off-putting to some, or at least, like, again, if you're reading the story just on the book itself, you do get to feel like something is missing. And I do admit, like, sometimes I do get that feeling from time to time. But damn, like, the illustrations are good and everything. Like, the crash scene and even, like, some of the moments and everything are still, really good. That I'm still also going to give this story another 8. So it's going to be another 8 out of 10 for me.
All right, so as for me, I still like the story. I still feel it's a little bit overrated, but I still enjoy the story. And talking about the problems I have with the story.
Nice. So what's your rating?
All right, so in my prototype score sheet, I gave it an 8. And you know what? I think 8 is the proper score for this story for me.
Okay, so far your score is one higher than mine. Yours is 17 out of 50. Mine's is a 16 out of 50 so far. Well, up next we got two very short stories. First up we got is Gordon's Whistle.
Yep, one of my favorite stories from this book. All right, so Gordon's Whistle. All right, so in this story, we basically see Gordon, who is basically jealous that Henry got a new shape, and he basically complains that Henry whistles too much. It isn't wrong, but we just don't do it, which makes Henry kind of a little bit sad because Gordon's criticizing him. And then Percy makes him feel better, said like, never mind, I love your whistling and I'm glad you're back. Then Gordon goes out to pull the express, and then later that day, Henry stops by at Edward Station. They both have a little bit of a chat. And then Gordon comes running by quickly with his whistle kind of broken because it's whistling all the way. And he makes it to the station, and it's so goddamn loud that the fire brigade goes out, horses upset their carts, old ladies drop their parcels, everybody covers their ears.
But of course, so basically, Gordon is bringing the Islandosaur into chaos.
Basically, and then the Fat Control tells him to take him away and stop that noise. Yeah, and then basically, and the problem is that his whistle valve was, for some reason, disconnected.
Not really much disconnected. I think it was just more jam, is what it was.
Yeah, it was jammed, and that was basically causing him to whistle continuously. So so two workmen knock it back into place, and then there's silence, and then
it's silence, and everyone was deaf after that.
and then that night Henry comes back and says, "It isn't wrong, but we just don't do it to no one in particular." And that, my friends, is Gordon's Whistle. Okay, so Gordon's Whistle is the highlight for me of the entire book. And let me explain why. There is a reason why Gordon is so unlikable before his book. And it's because, whenever he gets jealous, he likes to criticize others for having better parts than he does. And I think he deserved what happened to him. So I can't think of too much to say about the story because it's a really short story, like you said. So I think Gordon getting the whistle problem, kind of he deserved it for criticizing Henry altogether, and I do not feel sorry for him at all.
One thing I do actually like, actually there's two things I do like about the story. In terms of the book itself and everything, it's like you said too. I actually do like how Gordon gets his comeuppance, but I also like. I also do like the pacing of the story. It's like, yeah, sure, but it's not a story where you feel like it rushed itself too far and everything, or feel like it went by too fast. And the pacing of the book, like, it actually does, pace together very nicely in the end. Pretty much after you get done reading the story and everything, it's pretty much like you said, like, it's a funny story that, like, it's good for a good laugh and everything. And doesn't really go on for too long.
It's like basically making a short film. Basically, it's 3 minutes long, and they're basically made to make you laugh, and then you resume your life after that.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, so, it's definitely one of those stories you probably could see in, like, a silent film or something like that.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So
another thing too, this is more for Johnny Morris, but I actually do like how, on how after Percy, cheers up Henry. I actually do like how Henry takes it too.
Thank you, Percy. Thank you, Percy. I actually did listen to his narration before we started recording, and yeah, that was pretty cute. Not gonna lie.
That was, and again, even though like Percy's not the main focus of this story and everything. You get a little bit more into his character in this story alone. Unlike Thomas and everything, whereas Thomas can also be cheeky or probably not even care too much. Percy actually does, stick up for some of his friends, including, Henry himself, which is actually interesting, because when Percy first came into Sorter, Henry was one of the ancients that was acting rude to him and such. So to see, Percy actually, sticking up for Henry in the end, that's actually a little good, character moment and little character development right there for the both of them.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and considering the fact that Percy was the one that, considering the one that Henry was the engine that was wished by Percy and trouble
Pretty
in the shed. Anyway, so as for my rating for Gordon's Whistle, because I don't have too much to say about the story since it's very short. I gave it a 9 in my prototype sheet, but you know what? I'm gonna give it a 10.
Alright, so that's 27 right there. And actually, yeah, you know what? There's nothing really into the story I could see that's really bad at all or anything. Short, yeah, but again, the pacing works along just fine, and actually has a story that follows up to the next story. It does a good job as a follow-up story to Gordon being jealous and everything. And again, it's a story that has lots of good laughs in it too. So, you know what? I'm feeling generous today. I'm also gonna give it a 10 too.
Wow, so far we're doing good. We're doing good for this book.
Alrighty, well, here's this next story.
This story doesn't even belong in this book, but anyway, go ahead.
Alrighty, so Percy in the trousers. Percy wants a scarf. Why? We don't know. He just wants one. He tries to pull away the coaches by coming in as quietly as he could. He basically crunches a trolley, and he gets a pair of trousers caught correlated around his funnel as well as the top hat. And it just so happens to be the Fat Controller's top hat and trousers. And basically after that, Percy hates scarves again. That's basically the whole story.
This story doesn't even belong in this book, first of all.
I mean, okay, yeah. So in terms of a book being about Henry, yeah, this story definitely does feel very out of place because Henry only gets one line, and then the rest of the story is just mostly about Percy, and that's it. But I mean, to be fair, you could also say the same thing about Gordon's Whistle, where it's just it had Henry in it, but it was more about Gordon than Henry of anything else.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, you're right.
But even then, at least Henry was still part of the story in some way. In this story, again, he's only there for one line, and then that's it. You don't even see him. You don't even see him in the end. Just much in, which actually I think the TV series actually does a lot better job. Adapting this story and even putting Henry in the end right there, where Henry is feeling felt sorry for Percy and actually make a joke about the end where it's just well, I guess you won't need a scarf, Percy, because the weather's going to be warm tomorrow, and Percy's just fuck you, Henry.
There is one thing about the book version that I like more than the TV version, is that at the very end when the driver and fireman are gonna untie the pants, the trousers.
Oh yeah. About the Fat Controller's remark about well, Percy, you want a scarf? My trousers as a scarf.
Have your trousers as a scarf. He does. Yeah, that was comedy gold. You wanted a scarf.
That is actually comedy gold, right there. And even in the story, again, it's very short. Again, I even mentioned this in my season 3 review about how short that story is. I forgot just how short that story
is.
Because you just read it and it just flies by so fast, so you're just what did I just read?
I'm actually glad we started this podcast because I was very interested to get to read that story to see how short it was, and you're damn right, it is so damn short.
It is so short. It just flies by so fast. I guess you know what? I still stand by my second theory that that story was only made because that's Gordon's Whistle was short enough that either Audrey or even
Eric Marriott.
Yeah, Audrey or the publishers probably was just probably thinking well, maybe we could put one more short story in here just to make sure the book doesn't fall too short.
Yeah, and I applaud them for trying to put 5 stories, but I can see why they didn't continue the format.
Yeah, pretty much. And actually, like I don't think we mentioned this too, but actually, this story is actually adapted from another story. Actually,
Yes, it is
actually,
adapted.
so actually, Audrey did not make this on his own.
Yes, so basically it was adapted from, let's take a look at the book right here. Alright, this story is adapted from one told by Mr. C. Hamilton Ellis in The Trains We Loved. We gratefully acknowledge his permission to use it.
Yeah, pretty much. It was actually, I think that was a smart move that he did right there.
And he does it again in Gallant Old Engine in Steamroller.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Does he do? Because I know in the next book, Toby the Train mentioned, I do know that Mrs. Kindly's Christmas is kind of also adapted in some way, but it's not like a direct adaptation.
I'll have to verify that when we get to the next book in next week.
Yeah. Because I do know at least in that one, there was some inspiration based on that story and such. I don't remember for sure if it was adapted or it was just more inspiration, or Audrey took inspiration and put it into the story.
Yeah, we'll find out next week when we read the book.
Alrighty. But anyway, in terms of Percy and the Trials itself, it's short, but I still enjoy the story enough. It still has plenty of good laughs here and there and such. Pretty much when Thomas goes fishing and such. Now that Percy has a bad experience with scarves, he's just yeah, you know what? I don't like scarves anymore. So yeah, it's still a fun story in its own way. Short, yes, and yeah, it does really feel out of place in a book like this. But I still like it enough that I'm gonna be generous here, and I'm gonna give it a 7 actually. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
Like I said, it's short, but there's nothing really bad I can say about it. It's not like it's an awful story. I still enjoy it enough that I actually don't mind reading it from time to time. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7.
Okay, so Percy and the Trousers for me, like I said, my main criticism with the story is that it doesn't belong in this book. But the story on its own works fine. It's comedy gold because Percy wanted a scarf and he got a scarf forcefully, if you get what I mean. So Percy and the Trousers for me, it's a fun story, It's not bad because it's not in a book. It's in a book that it's not even about Percy. That's a separate criticism. So I don't have too much to say. I don't have too much bad to say about the story either. It's a short story. It's a fun one, and it's comedy gold too. So Percy and the Trousers, this was a story that that was the most difficult for me to come up with a rating, because I was thinking about it long and hard, because I kept saying that this story doesn't belong in the book, but thinking about the story again, you know what? I'm gonna give it a 7 too. Why not?
Alrighty, so again, I think we're actually 1 point higher, so let's take a look at our ratings real quick. So for me, for Cole, I gave it an 8. I also gave Flying Kipper an 8. I gave Gordon's Whistle a 10. And I gave this recent story a 7. So that's 33 right here. You gave Cole a 9. You gave Flying Kipper an 8. You also gave Gordon's Whistle a 10. And for this story, you also gave it a 7. So you're still 1 score higher than me. So you got a 34 out of 50, while me is a 33 out of 50.
Wow.
So, all right. So I think it's safe to say that after this story, I think this book might either be a middle of the road, a middle of the road good book, or at least a middle of the road meh book. So let's just see.
Yeah, let's just see. Well,
here we go.
The final story, and my heart is racing right now. In all seriousness.
Henry sneeze. I mean, to be fair, so okay, actually, Bonnie and I, we're talking about this long and hard. Where it's just should we actually talk about this? Do we are we going to talk about this? And we're just
I was very conflicted with that topic. When we first started the podcast, one of the first questions we talked about was basically, are we gonna talk about that incident in Henry's knees? At first, we discussed it and we thought no, but then as months went by,
actually, you more thought no. I was just more it's up to you if you want to talk about it. And then the more we thought about it, we were just you know what? It's part of history. As much as we want to ignore it, we can't really, because we ignore it, and we're just basically we're just basically trying to pretend it's not a big problem at all.
and that could have gotten us in a lot of trouble. So we decided for the best we were gonna talk about it. But first, let's talk about the story first, and
All right,
then
go ahead
we'll
and sneeze. Go
and
ahead.
then we'll talk about that topic. All right.
All right, here we go.
So Henry sneezed. We basically start off on a Saturday morning where Henry is puffing by with the express. He's gonna pass over a bridge or under a bridge, but then there are these stupid boys that are those that decide to drop stones on him on the funnel, and the stones, instead of going down the funnel, they hit Henry, and one hits the fireman on the head. Ouch.
Yeah.
And
It was by the way, how hard was that stone too? By the way, how many stones did they throw in the head? So he had to get bandaged.
my God,
And plus, too, was he wearing a hat too?
yeah, he was. The illustration shows him with a hat.
I'm not saying it's not possible, but I kind of question, how were they able to hit his head if he was wearing a hat?
Yeah. So and also the other stones break the glasses of the windows of the coaches. So that makes the passengers extremely angry, and they tell the guard and the fireman, the guard, and the driver to call the police. But the driver refuses because he has a better idea, which is that Henry's gonna sneeze at the boys. And the way the sneezing works is that Henry's smoke box gets puffed up, and then basically the puffed up produces ashes, and then when he sneezes, those ashes come out. And then basically they go to another station, and then comes the big moment where they get close to the bridge, and then Henry sneezes at the boys, and they go away, as black as soot. And then
wait a minute, Bonnie, did that really happen in the original story?
without trying to sound funny, no, it was another word, and we're gonna get to that in a moment. Yeah. And then the story ends with Henry with the fat controller saying that he doesn't like Henry sneezing on the bridges, and then
Henry, I'm trying to run a clean railway. All right, I'm not trying to get people sick. Okay.
and then the story ends with them repainting Henry. And then ever since that day, there have been no more boys dropping stones on the bridge.
I call bullshit.
I call bullshit too, but
But for the sake of fairy tales and everything, we'll believe it.
Okay, so let's talk about the story first, and then we'll dive into the topic. So I personally think this is a kind of a good story to end things on. I prefer the TV version more than the book version.
Yeah, I kind of do before. Okay, so in terms of I think at least in the TV's version, this book actually does work a lot more better as a trilogy and such than how it was structured in a book. Because at least in the TV series, it actually does feel more like a beginning where Henry has a problem, then the middle where that problem is going to get resolution, and then in the end where we see how Henry's going to deal with that resolution and such. Whereas in the book, like I said, again, well, yes, the book does feel like a proper ending in a sort of way to the book. It still feels like the Flying Camper should have been the final book. Because even when reading with this story, it still feels like there probably should have been something. There probably should have been something else that came after this story.
This story, it kind of has the same problem that James and the Express did. It just doesn't feel like a finale to me.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel like a finale. It just feels more like a story that still has open-ended questions that are probably never going to get answered.
Yeah, pretty much. I think the Flying Caper would have been the best finale to the book.
Yeah, same here. Again, we don't know how much this is going to affect our overall score for the book, but yeah, I do feel like that. I do feel like that. Yeah, the stories probably should have been ordered differently. But again, that's neither here or there. This is the order we got, so we're gonna take what we get.
Okay, so I'm gonna give my rating now, and then you can give your thoughts on the story, and then we'll get to the topic.
Okay. Well, actually, do we want to get to the topic first before? Okay, how about this? Let's do this. Let's get my quick thoughts on this book real quick. Let's talk about the topic first. That way we can get it out of the way, and then we can go to ratings.
Okay, so let's start. I'll do the introduction if I may.
Okay. Well, first let me get my quick thoughts on this book real quick.
Go ahead.
We'll go ahead and talk about the controversy.
Go ahead.
So Henry Sneeze, it's a fine story and such. There are actually a couple things I do like about this story. Once again, it is structured pretty nicely and such. There's a proper beginning, middle, and end. I actually do like how in this book and everything, like you do feel sorry. You feel sorry not only for Henry, but like all the passengers and even the crew that had to put up with like the boys' stupid antics and such, just because like they thought it would be fun to drop stones on engines and such, and everything. Um, and I actually do like how, like, in the middle of the book, like, Audrey actually does explain in a really clever way on, like, what the driver means when he says, like, they're going to sneeze on the boys and such. Again, like, the way he actually does, phrase it and explains it, like, he does a really good job at making sure that, like, both kids and adults, like, get what the driver is actually saying and such.
Also, did you notice how huge Henry is in one of the illustrations?
Oh yeah, I do admit. At least, are you talking about the one where like they're in a single box and like Henry's driver is in like his cab and
yeah,
stuff?
he's basically explaining about the house.
Like, yeah. Like he is actually pretty huge and such. He almost looks like a green. It's not a monster. It's a green whale. Yeah, he actually does look like a green whale and everything.
But I love that illustration because we're kind of starting to get into real world territory where where it basically makes you believe that these are real trains.
Pretty much. And speaking of illustration, I actually also like the other illustration where basically like Henry is actually winking at his driver for the plan and such. That's actually a really cute moment right there.
And also about that illustration, did you notice that James's wheels are red?
That's not James. That's the Red Eagle.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry about that.
Yeah. That's the Red Eagle, and you can tell because he also doesn't have number 5. Don't ruin the lore.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry about that.
Anyway, but yeah, and I actually, another thing I actually do like, there's actually lots of good comedy in there too, especially at the end where like the boys get their just desserts and such, but pretty much being scared away and everything, and again, while the ending does feel more like open ended in a sort of way, the ending does again still feels like a proper ending in a sort of way where it's like again it feels like there might have been or probably should have been more after this story and everything, but at the same time like you do feel like it did end it off on a good note and such, so like I don't have too much bad to say on that part.
But for me, it doesn't feel like a true finale if you think about it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a true finale in a sense. Like it just feels more like it just feels more like just a story that just ends and that's it. Book's over. Bye.
Yeah.
Go buy my next book coming out next year.
but it works fine as the last story if you think about it. It works absolutely fine. Could have been better. Could have been.
It does. I will say this. It actually does work better as like an end story than the end story in James the Red Engine.
And as for the sneeze, there is only one person that can do the sneeze correctly, and I think you know who I'm referring to.
You're talking about George Carlin? Or
George Carlin is the only one that can do it. George Carlin is the one that did it the best.
But to be fair, like I think Johnny Morris actually also does like a really good funny sneeze for Henry as well.
Yeah, Johnny Morris did it good. I will admit, but no one can top George Carlin.
But I will admit, yeah, George Carlin actually does nail it perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Right, even Ringo did a good job.
All right, okay, we're done avoiding this topic. We gotta talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Okay, so before we get started, let me introduce a little bit about we're not gonna make any jokes about this topic. This is a very serious topic, and you can tell that I'm very nervous about this.
Do you want me to at least explain like what we're talking about first?
Yes, do a little bit of a mini introduction on this, please.
Okay, so all right, so a little backstory on this book. This book, I believe this book was made during the 50s, right?
1951, it was published.
All right, 1951 it was published. So let's say that like this book was made during like 1950, like literally right after Troublesome Engines and such.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so since this was still in the 50s, at least in terms in America, because I don't know how it was in Britain, but in America we were still in the middle of civil rights. Actually, this was the era where civil rights were just starting to get off the ground and such.
Mm-hmm.
And because this was still in the civil rights and times were different, we still looked at like African Americans differently. Probably even more like, well, not probably. We definitely looked at them with like not all, but there were a couple of people that still had negative opinions about them and such. And again, I don't know how it was for Britain at the time, so I'm more talking about U.S. and such. Keep that in mind. But even so, when Henry the Green Engine was first published in 1951. in the story, Henry Sneeze. I'm pretty sure all of you probably knows about this.
Yes.
It's pretty much a well-known Thomas fact at this point. But Audrey basically, you know, in the line that we know today, where the boys ran away as black as stood, he wrote a different line. The boys ran away as black as blank.
Black as beep.
As black as the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you could put two and two together, you can kind of see why this is a very controversial opinion and such. And another thing about this is that, like, this was still in the book, like, for a good 2 decades. Until in 1972, where basically...
I have the article here on the book, on the Thomas Tank Engine Man. Mind if I read it?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, right here.
This was in April of 1972. Alright. I'm gonna read it, you know, normally. Once upon a time, kiddies, the Reverend W. Audrey wrote a little story about Henry the Green Engine. In a book from the story that has sold 100,000 copies since 1951. Last week, someone noticed a quote-unquote naughty word in the book. The sort of word you wouldn't expect from a gentleman of the cloth. I don't know how to pronounce that.
It's supposed to be like
it's CLOTH.
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 I think it's supposed to be like cloth or something.
Yeah, cloth. Henry the Green Engine got cross with some boys for throwing stones, so he puffed smoke over them until they were as black as beep. Yeah, so the controversy did not start until April of 1972, and it was a huge controversy.
Which, you know what? I'm actually kind of surprised it took him that long to be like... it took him that long to be like, wait a minute, hold up here. You know, you think people would have noticed it at least in the 60s.
And so Henry the Green Engine had been published over 20 years earlier, in 1951, when such a phrase would have seemed incongruous. Incongruous, I think that's how you pronounce it?
I think what they're trying to get is, like, you know, in 1951, no one really batted an eye that much, because, like, again, this was still the norm back in the day.
Yeah.
But ever since, civil rights, you know, kicked up and helped, you know, and helped make, you know, African Americans more equal and everything in terms of, like, you know, securing more better jobs and everything, and getting them, you know, way more better citizenship. That's when people started to, you know, take notice of, like, some of the things that were, like, you know, that were probably okay back then, but are definitely not okay today.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine if the book was published today and it had that word?
If this was published today and it had that word, Audrey would be canceled hardcore.
Hardcore immediately. Yes.
He would be canceled hardcore, and his books would be banned outright. No question about that.
Exactly. You nailed the point so right. Anyway, there's another topic. There's something in this topic that is also very infuriating for me. And we'll give our thoughts on the controversy in a little bit, but we're just describing it first so we can get an understanding of what it is. But this is infuriating. Let me read it. Things got worse. If you think the controversy, you know, was the warm up, things got worse. Let me read it. The headline said Henry the Engine author defends the use of the word blank. Woodward was quoted as saying that the complaint was rubbish and had probably come from what he called the race relations industry, and which he intemperamentally dismissed as being a load of cold swallow. Bullshit!
Yeah, you know, you might want to put a little headphones warning.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I mean, to be fair, that was actually called for. I was a little caught off guard, but you know what? That was actually called for.
Guys, I'm very sorry. Guys, I'm very sorry. If you guys were wearing headphones, I'm very sorry. I apologize. I really do apologize. I'm very sorry about that.
So it's okay. I'm pretty sure everyone can understand your frustration too.
It's just infuriating. Why is he defending something that it's just? I'm sorry.
Okay. Let me explain this right here. I'm not defending Wilbert or say that, like, you know, he should still keep it in there. I'm just more playing devil's advocate here.
Go ahead.
Right here, real quick. But again, so this was at a different time, and let's also keep in mind too, Wilbur was born in the late 1910s and everything.
1911.
Which, again, I don't know how race relations were in Britain at the time, but let's say they were close to, let's say they were somewhat close to America. If they were somewhat close to America, and Wilbur was taught that well, not necessarily taught, but pretty much grew up accepting the norms of society back then and everything. I can imagine it's not too hard to imagine why he would defend it and everything, because probably in his mind he was being like, well, this word was used back then and it was all right back then. Why are you complaining about it right now? Just being one of those just one of those people that are super stubborn and everything. He's not going to budge it in until the problem gets much worse.
Yeah. Let me see. All right, so let me keep reading. I'm sorry. I just had to calm down. People wrote that they were disgusted to read or had to read with horror the article in the Daily Telegraph. The response was very poorly received, and it caused the book to be banned in libraries, or some libraries basically just censored the bad word.
Which honestly, I don't blame him and everything. And again, I'm so surprised it took him that long to actually do something about it.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. Before the controversy started in 1966, when Johnny Morris was recording Henry's Niece for EP, he basically was one of the first ones to basically use another word to replace that bad word. In other words.
Yes, actually, he was actually the one that actually did say that. I'm more paraphrasing, but he's and the boys who ran away as black as soot.
Yes, he was basically, even Johnny Morris hated that racial slur back then.
I can just imagine Johnny Morris. I can imagine one or two things. When he got to that page, he probably didn't notice the word until he was about to read it, and it was just like, oh God, why? Oh God, can we do a different take on this, please?
Yeah, I can just imagine him in the recording studio, and then him reading that, and he basically is like, yeah, we gotta make some changes. He basically read it as smothered in soot and cinders.
Pretty much. Yes, that was it.
Yeah, and well, the damage was already done, and they basically quickly replaced the bad word with soot.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much, after that, I could just imagine the publishers, dragging Audrey into the office by the ear and everything, and he was just like, they were just like, all right, Audrey, you really need to change this book right now, or we're gonna be losing a lot of money here.
So yeah, the damage was already done.
Pretty much.
And that is the controversy, from our point of view. Okay, so thoughts? Go ahead, Seg. I'm gonna let you go first because I need to collect my thoughts.
Alright, so my thoughts personally on this. So, alright, so ignoring the fact that this was again a different time, and cultures and norms were different back then to how we view them today and everything. I do agree with a lot of people that Wilbur really should have thought this out very more carefully and everything. Even if he thought that this was the norm back then, he thought that no one's gonna really pay that much attention to it. And I also too, again, being more of a devil's advocate here on this and such, I don't think he realized too much just how much things were gonna be different moving forward and such. But at the same time, that's still no excuse that but for him to put that word in the book, children's book no less and such, and thinking that no one would complain or no one would actually question him about that word and such later on down the road and such. I do think that this was a word that easily could have been he easily could have reworded it and everything, and the fact that he was still stubborn about it and didn't want to change it and everything, it does say some stuff about him that actually does not put him in a good image for most people. So, me personally, do I think he's a bad guy, or do I think that he's racist because he put that word in here? A bad guy, no, because a bad guy, no. But again, we also gotta understand that Audrey came in a different time and everything. He was just human like all of us, and and even still, today and everything, there's gonna be some stuff that we're gonna say today that we're probably not gonna think about it too much, but once we get older and everything, we're gonna start regretting most of the stuff we did and most of the stuff we said, in the past as well too. So I think it's probably safe to say that like Audrey probably did learn his lesson. He probably actually did feel bad about it, moving forward and everything. So that's basically my thoughts on the situation.
Okay, as for me, I think you guys already know that you guys can already tell that I'm pretty pissed after reading.
Yeah.
After reading that the Wilbur tried to defend the use of that word. Okay, so gonna take the situation carefully. He shouldn't have done it. Like I said, that he shouldn't have done it. He should have gone back and actually replaced the word. He should have thought it more carefully. And as soon as that controversy was bound to happen, regardless if he put it there on purpose or not, it was coming regardless. And him trying to defend the use of that word is fucking infuriating. And like you said, do I think he's a bad person because he made that mistake? Like Zecoa said, no, we're all human and we all make mistakes. I don't think he's a bad person either. I thank him for giving us Thomas because he was the person that created my personal favorite TV show of all time. But I can't ignore what he did in this book. This is one of those topics where I get really angry every time I hear about it. Yeah. Because he shouldn't have done it. And I also don't. And what makes it really more angry for me is that he basically tried to defend the use of that word, and the excuses he came up with were just. It's just.
Yeah. Again, that's one of the moments where it's like, it does paint Audrey in a bit of a negative light.
Yeah. So. Let me see what I was gonna say, but yeah, I'm kind of glad that they quickly decided to replace the word with black as suit, and that was a smart choice, and I'm glad that Audrey learned from his mistake, and he moved on, and never made the same mistake again, which is pretty good that he learned from his mistakes. I understand that this could have costed him a lot of friendships.
Well, not just more friendship, but this definitely could have really ruined his
reputation.
Reputation. Definitely, pretty much guaranteed almost guaranteed that probably no one would probably even sell his books ever again.
Which thankfully that didn't happen, but I'm glad that he learned from his mistake. Anyway, with that controversy out of the way, let's wrap.
Let's give our rating to at least Henry Sneeze. So technically you were so actually you were the first one to. Do you want to give your rating first?
Yes, I'll go first. All
right. So what's your rating for Henry Sneeze?
All right. So like we said, I don't think it's like a perfect finale for the book, but it still works fine as a finale, and I think the story is fine. So my prototype rating was an 8, and I'm gonna probably give it a 7.
Alrighty, so 7. All right, so yours is a 41. All right, so before we give your overall, actually, do you want me to give you your overall score right now, or
no? Go with your score first, and then we'll basically do this.
So for me, Henry Sneeze is still a good story to me and such. As a way to end the book, it definitely could have been. I definitely do feel like the Flying Kipper definitely should have been the book to end, the story to end off the book and everything. But for this story as it is, it's not a bad way to end off the book. Like I said, it does have plenty of good laughs here and there. Outside of the controversy and everything that this book is, this story is ever going to be known for and such.
Sadly,
there is still plenty of good moments, in this book, with the driver explaining, how Henry's ashes work and such, and a little joke in the end about the boys getting their, just desserts and such. To even a nice ending about the driver, polishing Henry and everything. Me personally and everything, I think it's fair to say that I'm also going to give this book a 7. So all right, hold on, let me see. I gave Colden, I believe I gave Colden 8. I gave Flying Kipper an 8 as well. I gave Gordon's Whistle a 10. Percy and the Treasure, I believe I gave that a 7. And I'm giving this a 7. Alright, so mine's a 40 out of 50. Yours is a 41 out of 50. So at least in terms of me, my final overall grade for this book is going to be, so 40 divided by 50 it's going to be an 8. So it's going to be an 80%. So it's actually a solid B minus, which is actually not bad.
Yeah, and as for me,
yours is a 41 out of 50. So I think yours is also going to be a B minus as well too. It's an 82%. So you're actually ahead of me by you're only ahead of me by 2%.
So yeah, it's a solid B.
Yep, yeah, pretty much a B minus, a solid B, which actually that's actually pretty good. So that's actually a very good score for this book to have.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting it to be like a B minus, for example, but you know.
Well, I mean, like it is still a B minus and such for you.
Yeah.
B minus for both of us. But yeah. Actually, for me, I was actually ready to give this book either like a C, a solid C or something. But again, reading the stories as a role and everything, all of them are actually really good stories. Like I don't me personally, like I never really had anything that major, that bad, to speak about any of these stories. So
aside from the controversy, in other words.
Well, aside from the controversy, yeah. But even still, like all these stories, I had a good time, reading them and everything. Like, this is actually one of the book where it's like, I actually would not mind, coming back, to this book and actually reading it again and again and such.
Me too. Cole. I personally, I read this book a couple of days ago when I was in a pretty bad mood. And, this book, cheered me up pretty quickly. And the stories were so good that by the time I finished reading, I was feeling better.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, like, that's the same way I get when I read this book, too. Like, the stories are pretty well, told and such. All of them are structured pretty nicely. Again, I do agree that, like, maybe, like, some of the stories should have been, like, arranged differently and such. But for what we got and everything, like, all these stories, are good in their own right as well. There wasn't really a book where, it wasn't really a story where, like, I felt either middle or I felt like, was really poorly structured. This book was actually pretty good. So I think the grade that we give it is actually a very good grade for this book.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the grade we gave to this book. So, final thoughts on Henry the Green Engine.
So again, me personally, I do like this book. I think it's a very good book. A really good step up from like the last book too. Like it was structured just fine and everything. While I do agree that like the TV version does a much better job on like handling Henry's arc of the story and everything in terms of like visuals and such. The book itself is still a good book. All these stories are fun. They're structured pretty nicely. All of them had their good laughs and everything. It's a really fun story to read, so I actually do recommend picking up this book and reading it.
I have to agree, man. Pick up this book you need to pick up this book and read it. It's one of the best out of the whole series, in my opinion.
Same here.
And it's a really good book. I agree. It's a really good book, and the stories are pretty good. While I would have changed a little bit the order of the stories, as it is, I still think it's a really good book.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, and while the controversy might be a turnoff for some people, at least give this book a shot.
Yeah, I do agree. Give this book a shot. You will definitely not be disappointed.
Exactly. And so with that, we're done with Henry the Green Engine. So man, this was a fun episode, I will admit. This
was actually pretty fun. I know that this was a long episode because of like what we had to say, but again, like let's take a look at the pattern. Like so far, the pattern has been like the odd books have either been okay or been outright garbage. Because we had the 3 railway engines, which like we both gave it a meh. James the Red Engine was a big failure for both of us. And Troublesome Engine was another one where it's like a surprise failure.
Yeah,
and then we get to the even books, and the even books have done really good. Like so far, the only book that's given like almost like a really perfect score, like for all of us, was like Thomas the Tank Engine. We gave both of it like an A+. But even again, like Tank Engine Thomas, like we both gave it a solid B. And even with Henry the Green Engine, again, we gave that book a B as well too.
Yeah, pretty much. And
so we're basically almost done here. We still got some more. We still got 3 more stories left to go.
3 more books to go.
Which we're actually getting very excited for the next one. I know Bonnie's getting very excited for that next book.
I'm actually excited because I think you know why I'm excited.
Yep, we basically get to see his profile pic, old Grandpa Toby.
Grandpa Toby. Okay, so before we end up the episode, Grandpa Toby is a little nickname I came up for Toby. You know, I don't know why I'm calling him Grandpa Toby.
Actually, wasn't it something because like I know the Unlucky Tug didn't directly call him Grandpa Toby, but at least like he applied it like he's like that wise old grandpa and such.
Yeah, I think it was that, and also the personality he has in the books. Yeah, so that's why I call him Grandpa Toby. I'm very excited to get to Grandpa Toby's book in the next episode.
Same here. I'm actually looking forward to basically watch more, not more watching, just more like reading Toby the Train Man. I'm actually looking forward to that book a lot.
Yeah, and then after that we got the very first spin-off book for the podcast, which is going to be Thomas's Christmas Party, which I'm very, very excited for that book.
Me too. And pretty much after that, we got our finale book for the first season, which is going to be Gordon the Big Engine.
Yep, and the episode where we're going to dedicate it to Her Majesty herself, Queen Elizabeth II. So with that, guys, thank you for watching this episode on Henry the Green Engine. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed, making it for you, because this was a very fun one, I will admit.
It was, actually. I actually did have a lot of fun with this podcast, too.
Yeah. So with that, guys, thank you for watching. If you guys like this episode, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you guys want to see more episodes, hit that subscribe button as well. Also, don't forget to check out our channels, Old Teapot 7 for me, and Zecoa the Diesel for Zecoa. And he also has a gaming channel, which I'll also leave a link in the description below. And so with that, this has been Bonnie, also known as Old Teapot 7, here with my co-host,
Zecoa the Diesel, saying thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you all when we get to Grandpa Toby.
Take care, everybody, and we'll see you guys next week.